Hello, hello. Welcome back to the HSYY podcast. I'm your host, Jalyssa. And today, girl, we're just going to catch up. I have so much missed getting this mic and setting it up and chatting with my sisters, being on this podcast, and just sharing the goodness of God. I've missed it so much. So, where have I been? So, season 2 rolled out towards the end of summer last year. And the crazy thing is that if you follow me on social media, we had moved to Arizona in September of 2023. And after that, a lot of things in our life just kind of went on a downward spiral. Personal things happening with, my husband left the military, started a new career. We moved our family to a whole new state. It was just a big transition for us. And then shortly after that, my mother-in-law got sick. Some other things were happening with some of our family members. My dog, Coda, who is like a therapy dog for me, my furry best friend, he was hit by a car and he died. Just a couple weeks later, my husband got the worst call a son could ever get. And it was that his mother was not doing well and he needed to get there immediately. And he hopped on a plane within an hour and left for a few weeks to be by her side while she really, really sadly passed away. For us, felt very unexpected, very sudden. She was only 53 years old. So now we're dealing with change, tragic loss. Our dog, if you ever lost a dog, I would have never foreseen that pain, but gosh, it was awful. And then a loss like losing my mother-in-law was something that I can't even describe with words how painful that was and still is for our family. And then, he comes back and we have my mother-in-law's funeral and he gets orders. He gets orders to leave for, I think he was gone for 2 months. So again, another just completely caught off guard change. Such is the life as a military family, right? So now we're dealing with grief, loss. At this point, financial things are arising because of so much sudden change and loss and having to fill in gaps. And then my husband leaves and I'm homeschooling the boys at this time. And again, we're in a new state. Like we had not settled into this place. And it was just chaotic. While my husband was gone, after all of this, season 1 of the podcast came out, I felt like it was the right time and I don't regret that. It opened up my life and heart in ways that I could not have foreseen. And God was just so faithful through the interviews, the conversations, the messages that I still get from season 1 of this podcast. I'm getting emotional thinking about it, but it reminds me that even in what felt like a really dark cave of life, of season of life, God really was just this brilliant light through it all. So we launched season 1 and it was incredible. It did phenomenal. And I mean, numbers were really good. I was really surprised by numbers, but when I say it did phenomenal, I mean impact, right? So yeah, that happened. My husband comes back and we're trying to find school for the boys. Homeschool's not really working out. He starts a whole new full-time career, back full-time military, but new now, active in the Guard and not active duty Air Force, which was a big change. And yeah, the end of summer wraps around. We launched season 2. The boys have started in a new school. I'm homeschooling one. Noah, my oldest, and Malachi is still home, just turning 3. And in August, again, right as the new season was rolling out, Malachi, my beloved 3-year-old, leaves a faucet running upstairs in the bathroom, and we were having people over that day. I usually cook a big meal on Sundays, and just kind of opened the door for people to come and eat with us, and it was so fun. My family was there. We had friends over, people from church. We had found a great church that we had started going to, and it's pouring into the downstairs, into my office, which we had just built. It was my husband's birthday present to me, and into the garage. And by the time we get up there and we realize what's happening, it is just massive water. It had went into two of the bedrooms upstairs, into the hallway, down into the garage, down into my office. And that just opened up a new door of what felt like downward spiral for us, when we had felt like we were just finally coming up for air, still very much grieving, still very much in a lot of hardship, emotionally, financially, things like that. And that happens. So we call the owners, we're renting. Mind you, we're first time renters. We've owned our other houses that we've lived in other states. We're renting. So we call the owners, and they come over, they have some people look at it, and they're like, oh, we're just going to pull up the carpet. We're going to dry out, use these fans, these heaters, whatever, dry it out. Well, once they get in there and they pull up the flooring, they then realize that there is an issue with rotting. There was a continual leak from a pipe in there that would have never really been discovered if Malachi didn't flood that bathroom, which was, I'm sure, great for the owners because now they can fix their home accordingly. But for us, it just began a whole new set of change and struggle. So after a couple weeks of back and forth, those rooms are off limits, and those bedrooms, that was all the boys' areas. There's 3 bedrooms up there, and that's where all 5 of the boys stayed. And all of that area was affected, and their bathroom. So we're sharing a bathroom with them. There's no floor. Everything is taped off so that the contamination that's in the floor won't get on the stuff. It was just rough. They're like, hey, we have to tear all this down. We need you guys out of the house. So mind you, I'm launching this new season of the podcast. The boys are starting a new school. Nathaniel's starting a new career, and or a new job, I should say. And now we have to get out of the house. So they want to start the work. So they say that this was about, I think, a Wednesday, and they wanted to start that Friday. So we called our insurance, and our insurance puts us in a hotel. We are thinking we will be in this hotel for 3 weeks. I will spare you all the details. That stay in that hotel ended up being 2 months. Finally, at the end of that 2 months, no work has been done to the home. We have no projected move-in date. We're still paying a very high rent. We break our lease and we move. And within, I think, 9 days, after 2 months of being in a hotel with 5 children, driving them to school that's by our old house, not by the hotel, God blesses us with this home that we're in, which was really just, the house is very old and outdated. So aesthetically, for me as a photographer and creator, I'm like, oh, there's so many things I want to do in this house, but I'm so grateful. It is much bigger than our other house. It has a pool. The neighborhood is incredible. So there was this, beauty from ashes moment for us. But all of that change, after a bunch of grief and change, it really took me out in ways that I did not foresee. So anyways, I am struggling. I'm struggling to find my footing again. We move into the house. We pulled the boys out of the school. That school wasn't working out. We find them an incredible school, a Montessori school, and I've always wanted them to go to Montessori school. Noah goes back to school. I'm no longer homeschooling. And it just seems like the right time to get back on my content and get back on this podcast, because this podcast, y'all, has been my favorite thing that I have produced on the internet in all of my years of being online. I've been online creating since 2012. I started a blog in 2012, and in 2016 is when my Instagram kind of became more than just something for family and friends. I got my first, what I didn't realize then was a brand deal with a maternity company. And I've just been on the internet with blogs and YouTube channel and content creation and influencing ever since. This podcast has been my absolute favorite thing that the Lord has allowed me to produce. But for some reason, I could not figure out how to get back on here. there was a continuum of trying, of figuring out a new place in the house to record, of ordering new equipment that eventually came in. I'm getting yeses as I email and reach out to people who I was really hoping would agree to be on my podcast. And I don't know why I have been so stuck in getting back to this place. So one day I'm on a date with my husband, and we're just talking, and we go for a walk after dinner, and we're talking about a lot of internal things. And we find this one of our favorite little coffee shops that kind of turns into a bar at night, and we're sitting outside drinking some hot cocoa by a fire pit. And my husband asked me a question, and he asked me, when was the first time that you remember change really disrupting your life? And for the first time in my life, in my adult life, I thought back to being a 7-year-old little girl whose life was wrecked by change. If you know my story, you know that my mom went to prison with a life sentence when I was a very young girl. I was 6 years old. And at 6 years old, we get dropped off to visit our dad and our stepmom, and my mom never comes back, and she goes to prison. Which that's a whole podcast for another day. My mom is home now. Throw that out there. God was very gracious. After 21 years, she came home. So my mom goes to prison, and then we move in with my dad, and then a series of unfortunate events just continues to happen. There's some things that happen with my dad, so we're no longer able to live with him. And my mom's parents, my abuelos, they were like my whole heart. Like my favorite thing was my mom's parents. My abuelo, my grandpa Philo, he gets very sick and he dies. What felt like very suddenly. So now my mom is gone, my dad is away, and then my grandpa's dead. So we live with my grandparents, and then my other grandparents, and then eventually we land with my auntie and my uncle, who are literal angels on earth in my eyes and opinion. And my life was beautiful after that point. We moved back in with my dad when I was maybe 9 or 10, and I had a very, very beautiful life with my family after that point. But that 7-year-old little girl, something about her story kind of overshadowed the longevity of my life, and I had not even been aware enough to realize that that sort of trauma and instability would kind of linger for me until my husband asked me that question. At this point, I'm 32 years old. I've been through a lot. I've lived a beautiful life. I've had high highs, low lows. And it was in that moment, by that fireplace at that coffee shop, that I feel like something released in me to start to really understand myself in a deeper way and on a newer level. And I kind of went on a journey to explore that afterwards. And so I started thinking about every time after that change occurred and the way that I remember it affecting me. I was thinking about, I've never lived in a house for more than 3 years. And now I'm a military wife, and so that means that we have moved quite a bit. The transition of becoming a mom, and then a mom again, and then a mom again. Maybe moving to a new country, and then to a new state, and then to a new home, and then to another new state, and all of these things just started coming up in me, and I realized that I almost revert to that 7-year-old girl every time a change occurs that feels very unforeseen and very out of my control. And since Rona, really, we moved to Alabama, left our first home that we owned where we had all 4 of our babies, and moved to Alabama. And since then, 2020, my life, my family's life has been filled with change. And 90% of that change has been very unforeseen and very out of our control. And some of the change has been beautiful, but a good chunk of that change has been grief-filled, hard, sudden, unforeseen. And so I feel like I have been in a season of undoing some pain points that 7-year-old Jalyssa was clinging to. Like 32-year-old Jalyssa was clinging to 7-year-old Jalyssa's hardship and trauma and fear and scarcity and all of the things. And so I feel like God was really gracious to help dig some of those things up out of me. And in that process of letting the Lord dig those things out of me, I feel like I'm coming unstuck. And, you know, some of the people in my life, my husband and my closest friends, they see me beautifully because they see me very deeply. Now, for the people outside of my very close circle, I think what is perceived is a woman who is very productive and very disciplined and very full. And all of those things are true. And I realize about myself is that I have allowed those truths to be the loudest truths in my life, when sometimes those truths are actually blinding me from those deep rooted things that I have to tend to and to nurture in myself. And so, yeah, I feel like I have been in the last 6 months in a season of nurturing some things in myself. And it feels so good and so holy and so beautiful. And I feel like I have been reintroduced to myself in some way. And I really like me, and I really like the Jalyssa that the Lord has refined by fire. And even saying that makes me, I always say I will never cry on this internet, but even voicing that makes me feel very meek and very humble in the most holy way. Because there was a time where I was very afraid of God's refining. Not that long ago, I remember when the song Refiner came out and how it would make me icky to just watch the people around me in church or listen to the song come on a playlist, and people really just hands up, lifted high. I want to be tried by fire, purified. Take whatever you desire, Lord, here's my life. And I would almost tremble before I could and tremble and go mute before I could ever allow myself to sing such words. But in the season of life that has been the most hard and wretched season of my life since childhood, I can say that the refining of the Lord is so kind. The refining of the Lord is so merciful and gracious. Because what I did not see about myself is that those truths that I spoke of, that the world perceives about me, the Jalyssa that is jolly and jubilant, the Jalyssa that is a go-getter, the Jalyssa that is disciplined and grinds and is very productive, those began to become the identity that I clung the most to. And I was so attached to what I could produce that I had almost released attachment to the one who produced me, and that is the Lord. And so there I was, this last 6 months, really standing in, I once described it as, I feel like my husband and I had spent our whole adult lives building a beautiful kingdom for ourselves. And in the blink of an eye, a giant wrecking ball came and tore it all down. And then I looked next to me, and there was my husband and I standing in this rubble. But the most beautiful part of that was that the foundation was still intact. He and I, through all of it, have been such a strong and beautiful team. I feel more in love with him and more close to him than I ever have. And then in the weirdest way, I feel more in love with Jesus and more close to Jesus than I ever had. And I realize that God's refining is not a cruel and harsh ruler taking joy in whatever may produce good and holy things, but God's refining was the merciful, sometimes discipline, the gracious leading, and the holy building up of his children. And for me, what that looked like was a lot of detaching from this belief that I had capable hands and acknowledging that it is he who has capable hands. A lot of that refinement for me was the Lord actually taking things from me that were not like him, not from him, and would not produce the fruit and the life that the deepest parts of me want to produce. Because a young 17-year-old Jalyssa reading the Bible for the first time came across a verse in John that said, I must decrease so he can increase, and wept at 17 years old. And that is still the Jalyssa the Lord wants to keep intact. And so what the season of life has been like is a season of refining. And sometimes refining is really, really hard. But I know when I read the book of Romans and when I get wrapped around to Romans 8, which Romans 8 really, it makes me weep on the pages. But when I know that there is a God that we read about in Romans that will work all things together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose, so that we may be more like Jesus. I realized that it was God's kindness that has sustained me through all of the woes that this world has thrown my way. And as long as my foundation was firm, I would not be washed away by the waves of hardship and the waves of grief and the waves of fill in the blank, because I know you guys can relate. Sis, I know you have felt it too. In seasons of life, maybe right now, where it feels like waves are continually washing over you, trying to take you under, and under that current that feels so impossible to get out of. But the thing about the Lord is that he is a firm foundation, and if he is the one doing the refining, he will also be the one doing the sustaining. God is only concerned with making us more like his son Jesus. And so as I wait for him to work all things together for my good, because I believe that I am called according to his purpose, and boy, do I love him, I must abide so that in the refining, I come out a more brilliant version of the Imago Dei. And so that is what the last 6 months of my life have looked like. And that is where I have been in this season of what I believe is hiddenness and refining. And I feel even more excited to be back in this space and back on this podcast. And whoever's watching on YouTube or listening on an app with a more refined version of myself, clinging more tightly to Jesus than I ever have before, and more sure of what he has put me on this earth to do than I ever have been before. And so the next couple weeks, it will just be me and you. As weirdly, y'all have requested so much in season 1, is more podcasts of me sharing. So that's what you'll get over the next couple of weeks. And I want to talk to you guys a little bit about what the process of getting unstuck has been like for me, and the way that I believe the Lord wants me to help others do the same. We're going to dive into some conversations on identity, some conversations on moving forward, and then we're going to have some incredible guests back on the podcast that I cannot wait for you guys to hear from. It is so good to be here, and I'm grateful that you would take the time out of your day to listen to my voice. And I pray that this podcast makes you feel seen and known. The God that saw Hagar in the wilderness is the same God who sees us. The God that promised a water that quenches eternal thirst to the woman at the well is the same God that will fill us up and give us what we need, even when the seasons feel so dry and so long and so weary. So I'll see you back next week, and we're going to dive into getting unstuck. Have an incredible week. Love you, sis.